Doing this.
God, I love your voice.
Yeah, well, I would hope so. You hired me to narrate the story of your family's life. I'm glad you like it. Jack Teeter is the well, your great uncle was Ralph.
Right.
Ralph Teeter is the star of a documentary called Blind Logic. Jack, the guy sitting across from me, reached out to me out of the blue, as people do from time to time, to see if, there was any interest in narrating this project. And I looked at your rough cut and I read the script. And honestly, Jack, I'm not often taken aback. There are a lot of great stories out there, and I feel like I know most of them, especially in this space. But I just had no idea what your great uncle had accomplished, who he was. And I was just so impressed that somebody in his family would take the time to put together such a great tribute. So congratulations.
Thank you. I have to back up a little bit because it was my nephew, Scott, who suggested you. We were sitting in Detroit at the Automotive Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And I have a film crew. We're getting ready to put Sarah Cook, president of the Automotive Hall of Fame, on camera. And Scott said, well, who are you going to get to narrate? I said, well, I haven't thought about that yet. There's a lot of great guys. And he said, Mike Rowe. And I said, you know what? That's a good idea. Anyway, that was the genesis.
Here's the way I heard it, or at least the way I remember it.
Okay.
By the time you got to Mary, she came to me and said, some guy wants you to be the voice of Ralph Teeter, right? And I'm like, well, who's Ralph Teeter? And she said, I don't know. It's just gonna be, we get a lot of inquiries, but
right.
This is how it starts, right? And I'm like, well, so I Google Ralph Teeter, and I'm like, I think this guy had something major to do with the automotive industry, and that's how it started. And then I read the script, and I was like, you know what? I would do that, but just so people understand what in the world we're talking about, give me the thumbnail. Who was your great uncle, and why should everybody in this country be familiar with his contribution to civilized life?
Well, he's known in the automotive circles for inventing the cruise control. That's what people know about him, if they know about Ralph Teeter, because he's really an unknown person at this point, but this will all change. His life basically spanned the entire development of the American automobile industry as we know it. Mm-hmm. For example, he was born in 1890. 1895 was when he was 5 years old, about the first time a car actually made it into Indianapolis.
Not Detroit.
Not Detroit.
That's the first thing would surprise people. This story starts in Hagerstown, Indiana.
Hagerstown, about an hour east of Indianapolis. Indianapolis became the automobile capital of the world. Mm-hmm. Now, there were, 120 different automobile manufacturers in Indiana. Now, these were all custom-built cars. Mm-hmm. And this was all before Henry Ford developed the assembly line, and that changed everything.
Yeah.
But backing up again to Ralph in 1895, the reason why that year is so relevant is he had his accident.
Yeah.
This is when he had an accident prying open a cabinet and hit his eye, stabbed his eye.
A knife went straight into his eye, and he immediately lost the sight in that
one
eye.
And then the disease moved to the other eye. But here's another important
What was
point.
the disease, Jack? How does that work? I didn't. It must have been an infection of some kind.
It was. And I knew you were going to ask that question.
It's my job to ask the tough questions, Jack. That's why I'm here.
And
I'm not just a narrator.
I can't think of the name of it. Maybe Chuck will Google it.
Not likely.
Not likely. But that year was relevant, Mike, in the sense that his Uncle Charlie Teeter, invented the railroad cycle car for investigating and all the tracks.
Yeah.
If they were right or if something wrong, they were used, and he invented this thing.
Different than, like, the old Gandhi dancers, right? They get on these platforms, and that was manual, but this was not?
This was based on the bicycle technology. So in other words, a guy could ride it along the track and check to see how it was. Well, that kind of revolutionized that whole industry, and so the company was formed. Mm-hmm. And they were building these railroad inspection cars.
Yeah.
And it kind of exploded. They were purchased worldwide, and but the point of this is that this is where Ralph really developed his mechanical skills. Now, he developed those even before his accident, so he loved to play with tools.
Yeah.
He hung out at the factory, but after his accident, that didn't stop. His passion was tools.
How old was he again when he lost his sight
He
entirely?
was 5. He was 6 by the time he completely lost his sight. And his parents raised him to be as if he could see. They raised him
as if he wasn't blind.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool thing about it. And that stuck with him his entire life.
Two things as I got into the script that immediately convinced me I wanted to be a part of this. The first was your great uncle's natural affinity for tools and the way they just became an extension of his person. That was my granddad, Carl Noble. Same chip.
Right.
Okay. He only went to the 7th grade, but there wasn't a tool in the box that you couldn't hand him that he didn't intuitively understand and know how to use.
Yeah.
His language, it was tools, and he was an incredibly handy man and made a pretty great living as an electrical contractor and worked in the trades all of his life. So that resonated. He also was a big shot in the Lions Club, and for their philanthropic project, they worked to raise money and help the people at the Maryland School for the Blind. So my pop is a tradesman's tradesman who spent a lot of his life working with and helping the blind. In fact, when I was in the Boy Scouts, my Eagle Scout project was reading to the blind and building a bridge at the Maryland School for the Blind. So if you're me and you're looking for reasons to do a project with somebody you've never heard of, you got me in the first 3 pages. You got. I mean, I was your Huckleberry right there.
Well, I read about that, about what you did as an Eagle Scout, and that you were reading to the Maryland School of the Blind, and I thought that was a really cool project that you did, and Uncle Ralph would be very proud of you for doing that.
Well, I don't want to make it about me. The point I'm trying to get at is what kind of stuff possessed this young boy at 12 to dream that big. And I'm also super interested in, would it have been better to have been born blind? Or, do you get 5 or 6 years of memories seared into your brain about everything from color and what people look like, right? And like all of these other things. And I've asked that question to a lot of people that I know without sight, and the answers always vary. So I'm just curious about your take on it.
Well, that's very interesting because I've thought about that too, and I don't know the answer to that, but I can speculate from Ralph's standpoint, having seen for 5 years gave him the ability to strengthen his mental capability of visualizing. In other words, when he was completely blind, he had to use all of his other senses. Most importantly, I think hearing and feeling and touch. And but I think because he was able to see at one point, he may have used that in his library of visualization. I don't know, but I do know that he had a gift for memory. So throughout his life and walking about town, he would memorize how many steps, where the buildings were, where everything was, and he memorized voices. He recalled everybody's voice. I don't know how he did that, but he did. And it amazed me because he would, even if they had a cold, he would still know who it was.
Well, they say that when one sense goes, the others become sharpened.
Right.
But to this point, like you make the point in the movie, and I don't know if one of your family members elaborate on it or not, but this guy was like a bat, right? I mean, like echolocation. He could figure out where he was by footfalls and not just counting, but the way the sounds of the town reverberated back to him.
The other interesting thing, he refused to use a cane. He wanted to be as normal as possible. And if he had a cane, well, he would almost have to admit that he was blind. And the other thing, he refused to learn Braille.
Wow, now that's controversial today.
Now, I knew that when I was making the documentary, but I didn't know why he refused to learn Braille. And then I learned from the family, well, if he learned Braille, he would have to kind of admit that he was blind. And he didn't really want to do that. He didn't look at himself as handicapped. And he didn't want people to focus on that.
That's just laying a little pipe so people understand. You got a 12-year-old kid who wants to build a car, who is completely blind and has been for 7 years and is filled with all the confidence necessary to believe he can make that happen. So go ahead and walk me up to, I guess, perfect circle at this point.
Okay, well, high school, not so much of a challenge because he seemed to get through that pretty well. In fact, even becoming the manager of the basketball team and building the first electric light in Hagerstown for graduation, 1908. He built a sign. He wired it from a generator that he got, and then he wired his family's home, and then the town got wired up for electric. And college was a bit of a challenge. He wanted to get his engineering degree. Well, University of Michigan had a great school.
Yep.
But they turned him down because they didn't know how to teach a blind man engineering. And no fault of theirs because, well, how do you do that?
There's no playbook for this.
Yeah. So his older cousin, Neva, took him she had a fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania. They went. He packed enough bags for a whole semester. He was that confident that he was going to convince the dean of engineering.
Who's the dean? Remember?
Henry Spangler.
Right, Spangler. Yeah.
Henry Spangler. And so he met with Henry, and he wasn't quite convinced. And he had to talk to the faculty and told Ralph, come back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll have an answer. But he had to talk to his faculty. How are we going to teach this student engineering? He's blind. Well, they all agreed, we'll let him try. And they all didn't think that he would last more than 2 weeks. But
they let him try precisely because they knew he'd fail.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, he went through, he graduated, came back for his master's. He was the first blind student to graduate from the university and the first blind engineer on record in the United States. So that was great. Anyway, he came back to the family company. By that time, they were building internal combustion engines. So they evolved from the bicycle inspection car, the railroad inspection car, into the internal combustion engines.
As one does.
Yeah. In that time when the cars were, and so it was the Teeter Hartley Motor Company. And so that was going well. But then, okay, 1917, 1918, World War I happens. Well, men are going off to war. Well, Ralph wanted to serve his country, but how? And he was accepted for civil service at the New York Shipbuilding Company. Well, this is kind of funny. They gave him an office, but they didn't give him a job. They didn't know what to do, or what are you going to do? Here, Ralph, you got an office. And he overheard them talking about a problem they had.
Because he can hear anything a mile away.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. He can hear anything a mile away, and he overhears a problem they have. They can't balance these turbine rotors in their torpedo boat destroyers. The boats are breaking apart at high speeds.
So people understand the incredible amount of torque being generated by these turbines. And if they're not perfectly in sync,
right,
it's like those sympathetic vibrations that could shake a bridge right to the point where it would collapse.
So he thought, hey, maybe they'll listen to me. So he told him, he said, I think I can figure out what the problem is. And they were, hey, come on, what do you know? You can't see anything. But he balanced drive shafts for race cars at Indy. And he knew that he could balance these by spinning the rotors in opposite directions.
Right.
Now,
why
who
did
would
he
think
know
of
that?
I don't know.
Why did he know that?
I honestly don't know.
It had never been done.
I don't know. But he could touch and feel, and somehow they were balanced. Well, by that time, the war was ending, and there was no need for those destroyers. But the news picked up that story, and everyone was kind of blown away that this blind kid from Hagerstown fixed something that the top naval engineers couldn't. But anyway, those ships were used in World War II.
He actually solved the problem.
Yeah, he solved
by
the
getting
problem.
the turbines to spin counterclockwise and clockwise contemporaneously.
Yeah, amazing. So he came back, and he had a bit more confidence in his engineering abilities, and his Uncle Charlie and Ralph figured out that the key to the internal combustion engine was the piston ring. The piston rings, in those days, you had to replace them like every 10,000 miles, 12,000 miles, maybe 8,000 miles. It just didn't last. So they figured out, let's focus on the piston ring, because at that time, Henry Ford with the assembly line was kind of revolutionizing the automobile business, and Indianapolis was not the capital of the world anymore because all the custom built motor cars were going out of business. Right,
because Henry Ford is making it possible for everybody to have one.
Their custom engines, they weren't structured or built for the assembly line, so they really wanted to get out of that business, the way I understand it. So the piston ring was really going to be the focus.
And this is a very simple thing, right? I mean, so people can visualize it.
Yeah, I should have brought some in.
6 inches maybe in diameter.
Well, they're like this, and say this is the cylinder. They wrap around the cylinder, and they actually lubricate the cylinder wall. So when the cylinder is going up and down, and you got 8 cylinders, there's 6 in a car, they're going very fast.
So was it self-lubricating at that point?
Yeah, well, to some extent, but their rings became more advanced, and they were able to lubricate, and they also designed fluid actuated, well, actually Ralph invented a fluid actuated gear shift in 1924. So that came shortly after he came back from serving in the military.
So they basically then had a device that they were mass producing and
Right.
selling directly into Detroit. And so this device, this piston ring, became an integral part of everything that came off the line for some time.
Well, it became so important that every new engine coming out of Detroit or any other manufacturer that was still around, there was still a few in Chicago. Indianapolis probably had, Fred Duesenberg had his going on for a while. So every engine required a special ring. So in other words, you couldn't mix all these rings with all these other engines. They had different diameters of cylinders and everything. So he would go up to Detroit and work with their engineers. Okay, you got a new engine, now we need a special ring. Anyway, so the business really grew because of the need for piston rings. And over the course of the years, technology got better, and they didn't have to replace them every 10,000 miles. Then they could last 20, 30, and nowadays you don't even replace them.
Right. For me, one of the most interesting parts of the movie, and I know it's controversial to talk about it today, but I want to, it was the advent of the unions and the role that Charlie and Ralph assumed when the unions came to town. Because not every town had the relationship with the automotive industry that
Right.
Hagerstown had with Perfect Circle. And that just is so poignant, you know, when you look at the town differently all of a sudden, and when people are coming in from out of town and those protests and those riots, that was national news, and Ralph was right in the thick of it.
Well, the interesting thing about the union thing was that Ralph and the company were very friendly and respectful towards the early unions, and they signed contracts, and they were amenable to work with the union. And those early unions were a little bit different before the big giant union in Detroit,
UAW.
UAW, CIO. And the interesting thing that was happening was that these little small towns with these factories, this Perfect Circle became on the radar of the union in Detroit. And because they were so powerful in Detroit, they had the big three. They were going after parts companies, and Perfect Circle was on their radar, and the other parts companies too. And then they decided to come down to Hagerstown, and again, their first trip down in 1948, Ralph signed a contract. It was fine, okay. But at that time, the union was a little bit different. The workers didn't have to join. It was a union contract, certain amount of wages. And then they came back again, and then they were demanding more. And that was about 3 months after they came down. So they were demanding more. And
Was it the workers themselves, Jack, or was it purely outside forces coming in to unionize? Like, I'm always curious about how these things originate.
well, they originate with union reps that go down to the town, and then they meet with the workers outside of business and restaurants or wherever they gather, and they try to convince them, hey, look, you guys are working, you need to be protected. And I think to some extent that was going on certainly before 1955. That was the big mess. And so there were some workers that were convinced they definitely that they wanted to sign up with the union. And the reason is World War II, when they were hiring so many workers, they probably hired another 2,500 workers that did not understand the value that the company places on employees.
Yeah.
Certainly they didn't know what happened during the Depression, and that they were building schools and putting, really building the community. They had no recollection of that. So they were just workers working a job and wanted more money, and they probably thought, oh yeah, the union's going to come in. This is great. Well, anyway, they came back, and it got a little ugly, if you recall from the movie, and then they came back again. And this time they brought in 1,000 sympathizers from other 1,200, I think. They set up a tent city, and they brought violence to the townspeople. I mean, and they weren't local; they were from outside, and they were going to try to muscle there, and it just got ugly. I mean, the governor had to declare martial law, after the local police couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And
people died?
No, there was gunshots. There was a couple of people that got shot and wounded. It got to the point where they had to send in tanks. That's when the National Guard came in. And
you're oddly understated here, Jack. I mean, like once we start talking about the advent of tanks.
Yeah.
I mean, as I recall, as the narrator of Blind Logic, the film we've been talking about now with Jack Teeter, people were barricaded inside the facility. I mean, it was super sporty. It could have gone way off the rails.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, they could have. They decided to stay in the factory, and some managers and workers together, and they were actually armed, and because they thought they were going to be bombed. There was threats to bomb the factories, and it got to the point where, this is getting real dangerous, folks, and one guy had his wife send clothes in, his clean underwear, and because the mail kept coming. But I
just figured everybody's shorts are going to be filthy at this point. I mean, there's a lot of fear in the air.
It was, and I actually talked to a couple of older folks that are still around that were there during the riots and the strikes, and this one fella who operated the gas station where all the Teeters came, and he was saying, oh yeah, they'd come in and they'd harass us, and they harassed townspeople, and it was really scary. And he said they came in and harassed me and said, do the Teeters, tell me about the Teeters, tell me about this Ralph Teeter, and he said, well, no, he wouldn't say anything. He just played dumb. But it was really bad. But they got through it. And now here's the interesting thing. They settled on the exact same terms that Ralph offered them.
Right.
The exact same terms.
So there was no material improvement.
There was no gain.
Because he was already treating his workers, in relative terms, pretty damn well.
And Ralph's, his feeling was, if the union can convince the workers to join, that's another thing. He's not going to get in their way. And they did. One factory joined the union.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of caved into the demands. The other three stood strong.
So what ultimately became of Perfect Circle? And Charlie at some point dies.
Yeah, 1937 he died. And then Lothair, his son Lothair, took over. 1946, Ralph Teeter became president. And
right after the war.
Yeah, right after the war. And around that time, I guess, and during the 50s, they were now selling their products in 91 countries around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 50s were kind of cool because after the strike, Ralph had already by that time invented the cruise control. And but back in the late 40s, he couldn't convince his own board of directors to manufacture the cruise control.
Because it never fails. All great, obvious ideas are initially greeted with insanity. You must be crazy.
Yeah.
Who in the world is going to get in a car and push a button or turn a dial that lets that car determine its own speed or set that speed? That was heretical. And I'm only making the point because 3 days ago I got in the back of a Waymo with no driver and just sat there
Yeah.
like a Christmas ham.
Rose and I did that too.
Yeah, yeah. Rose,
They're great fun.
Rose, by the way, is Jack's girlfriend. Quick sidebar: you made me banana bread, Rose.
Yes, I did.
Oh, goodness, look at this, and there's what is it? Is that rosemary on there?
Yeah, rosemary and lavender.
All right, this is
I'm just gonna-
on that sidebar. That's kind of her world famous.
World famous banana
Yeah,
bread.
yeah.
All right.
Everybody loves it.
All right. Well, I'm going to dig into that once we're done talking. I'm just going to let it sit here right now as a tease.
So I have to add something, Mike, that you were saying about the cruise control and the Waymo. But going back to 1924, when he invented this automatic gear shift, he went to his manufacturing friends and said, look, we got to manufacture this. And they said, there's no way that people are going to pay for the luxury of an automatic transmission, an automatic gear shift. And, well, he sold his patent to Bendix.
Wait a minute. I forgot that. So,
yeah.
How instrumental was Ralph in ushering in the automatic transmission?
Oh, very. 1924, the fluid actuated gear shift. There was an automatic gear shift. And his friends, and he had a lot of friends in manufacturing, and they just said no one's going to pay for the luxury of
not shifting gears.
Yeah, because it was going to be too expensive. Well, fast forward to what you were saying about the cruise control. The company didn't want to manufacture it, and well, he was very disappointed. And but he built a couple of samples for the truck business, but that was slow to get any enthusiasm for whatever reason. Other things were going on. But the company was really growing at that point. Then after the union strike, we'll say 1957, he had the cruise control. Really, he had a good model of the cruise control, and he convinced Detroit companies to test it.
Is Perfect Circle still Perfect Circle?
No, it was... the last factory closed in 1995, 100 years after the company was born. It was bought by, 1963, the company was acquired by Dana. That was a big company. And then they bought Perfect Circle and they kept the brand. And then it was subsequently sold to a German company. So a German company today has Perfect Circle brand, and they're making piston rings.
Okay, so it gets a little convoluted, but Perfect Circle goes where it goes, but Ralph is still around, and he takes the idea for cruise control to the big guys in Detroit.
Yeah, to test it.
Yeah.
And Chevrolet, Ford, and Chrysler, I believe, were testing. And at the same time, he was getting the company kind of excited about it. So one of the reasons why he was getting them excited about it is he turned over the presidency to Bill Prosser, his longtime friend and company veteran, because, and he was very smart about this, he became chairman, but he knew that Bill Prosser could sell the board on the product because he was very good in sales. And so Bill Prosser sold the board on the cruise control on manufacturing. So they had a press conference, and they flew all these journalists in from Detroit. Meanwhile, the Detroit is testing the product, and so it's getting all this press and excitement. And Chrysler decides, they invite Ralph up. We're gonna put it on our 1958 model Chrysler New Yorker and one of their other ones. So they were the first to introduce it, and the company manufactured it. And then Cadillac came in 1959. And then I think it was Oldsmobile, then Ford, Chevrolet. Then they all came in.
But it wasn't overnight. It's not
No,
like
it
somebody
wasn't
flicked the
overnight.
switch and said, oh, we've got to have the cruise control. It took time. People had to, right? You've got to sell that down in a lot of different ways across the whole country. And it just wasn't immediately embraced, is my point. And once again, your great uncle is just sitting there hearing, no, that's not going to happen. They're never going to get an automatic transmission. They're never going to take cruise control. No, never going to happen.
Do you know, he said in 1974, he said, if I could have seen, I would have never developed it. He came up with the idea in 1936. He, of course, had drivers for him. And one of them was Harry Lindsay, his patent attorney. And Harry was a bad driver. Let's just say it like it is. He was a throttle brake driver.
He's a patent attorney.
Yeah.
He's got a lot going on.
So, I can only visualize Ralph sitting there like this. Geez, Harry.
I'm getting nauseous.
So he said to himself, well, okay, I got to invent something that will make the car go steady. And so for 10 years, he tinkered in his workshop. And this is where he gets in with his hands. He built a cruise control in his workshop, basement workshop, with his hands.
Look, you don't want to overstate it, but a blind man developed cruise control with his bare hands, working with tools in his basement. And that same guy says he never could have done it had he been able to see.
Yeah.
That's where your movie lands. And look, we can talk about all the zigs and zags. Why bother? Watch Blind Logic. It's terrific. Yeah. I want to spend the rest of our time just talking about the man and his impact on you and why you decided to dive into this project, which clearly got out of hand. I mean, it sucked up years of your life, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But
Mike, before you move on,
yeah,
I just want to. I did find the name of that disease, and it's kind of interesting because it's called sympathetic ophthalmia.
That's it.
Yeah.
And basically,
That's
it comes from if you have an eye injury, particularly a piercing one in one eye, then the other eye develops sympathy for it, and degenerates
Isn't
by
that
itself.
crazy?
It's really crazy, yeah. But that's what it's particularly prevalent in puncture wounds to one eye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It kind of rhymes in a weird way with the other thing that I was trying to think of, which was sympathetic vibrations.
Correct.
So, like, if you're marching in the army and you get to a bridge, you break cadence, because if you're marching all together, you got 100,000 men marching across a bridge, those sympathetic vibrations will do something to the structural integrity of the iron and the basic structure itself, and it will collapse. So it's a very powerful thing for people to be doing everything at the same way at the same time. And in a weird way, I guess your body somehow, right? I mean, what a strange, like, why would my right eye go blind because my left eye did? If not, what's it called again? I'm fascinated by this.
Sympathetic ophthalmia. Sounds like I'm lifting.
That's the term.
That's why I keep Chuck every now and then.
I knew he'd come up
it
with
took him
it.
40 minutes, but he found it.
Yeah,
and
he
he
did.
chimed in at just the right time.
For the record, I had it a long time ago. I was just waiting for a minute to jump in. So.
Thank you, Chuck. I'm glad you came up with that.
Fascinating. Really, really interesting. But Ralph married, had kids.
One
kid.
Yeah. Well, that's
Marjorie.
Yeah. That's another whole story about my Aunt Nellie, Ralph's wife. I mean, she was a force in her own right. And, but Marjorie was their only child, and she wrote a book called One Man's Vision, 1995. And when I read that book, I mean, it was just amazing to me, because she was told by a few people to write a book about your dad. You know, he's really quite amazing. You should write a book. And she was all for it and thinking of maybe having a professional writer write it. And an editor told her, oh, no, you have to write the story. Anyway, you asked about Ralph. And I guess Ralph as a person, the way I remember as a kid, was very kind, an incredible sense of humor. He loved to laugh. He loved people. And he had a gift to make everyone feel comfortable no matter who they met. And he had an impact on so many people throughout his life, and including me and my brother and sister and Ralph's grandkids. But he was an amazing man, and what he was like at the office, I don't know. I can only assume from what I hear from other people that he was an incredible leader. And he cared deeply about his workers, and he was passionate about the company, and that was his life. And so the inspiration for me to make this documentary actually started in 2013 at a family reunion, and my father, Jack, was still alive. My Aunt Marjorie was still alive, and we met at Lake Wawasee, where Ralph had a summer home.
And he was kind of a boat guy too, on top of everything else, wasn't he?
Was he a boat guy? He built speedboats, and
Of course he did.
Yeah, and he became friends with Chris Smith, one
As
of
in
the,
Chris Kraft?
Yeah, as in Chris Kraft. In fact, he bought a lot of Chris Kraft, but he built speedboats. He loved Lake Wawasee because he could build speedboats and race them. So he convinced his parents when he was young to get a cottage. So he spent his summers up there. Anyway, that's where we had our family reunion. And I don't know who mentioned it or how it came up, but the idea of a movie about Ralph Teeter came up. And it might have been my Aunt Marjorie. So they kind of looked at me, okay, where do we go from here? And
Why'd they look at you?
Well,
because they knew your resume?
Yeah, they knew my resume.
And real brief, what is that, just so people understand?
Well, I worked at Universal Pictures for most of the 80s and in marketing, and I moved into production. So I had, and distribution, I had a sense of how films were made. And I went to UCLA Film School. And so they looked at me, okay, where do we go? I said, well, that's a great idea. And but I had my career, I had a job and things going too. I said, well, let me start with an outline, and then maybe I'll develop a script and adapt the book. And so I did that off and on for 10 years. And it wasn't until 2021 that I decided, well, I have a script. Oh, I should backtrack. Before my father passed away, he read an early draft of the script, and a very early draft, so he was pretty excited. My Aunt Marjorie read an early draft before she passed away, but they were really rough. But the fact that those two knew that I was going to make this documentary makes me feel good today. Anyway, I refined the script and had 48 revisions, and then 2021 I decided, okay, I'm going to make it. Stop talking about it, Jack. You know, call your cousins up and say, you know, you're coming to Hagerstown. You're going to put them on camera. I'll bring a film crew to Hagerstown, and I'll start there. Now,
were they nervous? Were they enthused?
They were excited. Well, my cousin Ralph is very excited, and about this. He was named after
Ralph's
his
son.
grandson.
Grandson, Marjorie's son.
Yeah.
Of course. Okay.
Anyway, we put them on camera, and then it took 2.5 years to make it. I didn't know if I had images. I didn't know if I had footage. I didn't know where I was going to get it. I had the script, but where am I going to put the visuals? I didn't know if I had them. Cousin Ralph, he had an archive in his basement, and I spent a week going through images and just see if I had enough stuff, but I honestly didn't know. And I was kind of going on blind faith. Anyway, it sort of worked out.
Yeah, I'd say it sort of worked
It
out.
worked out to the point now.
Blind faith led to blind logic.
Led to blind logic, which is circling back to One Man's Vision, the feature film. We're in development of a feature film now.
Oh,
Yeah,
terrific.
yeah.
That could be huge.
Well, we're excited about it. We have the writer, Howie Klausner, who wrote Space Cowboys and the film Reagan. So I have the film team that brought you Reagan last year.
With
Sean McNamara directed.
Mark Joseph?
Yeah, Mark Joseph was the producer, and
Yes.
Dennis Quaid was the star.
That's right.
Dennis Quaid sat right where you're sitting.
I know. I watched that podcast.
Well, you've got excellent
I
taste.
love Dennis Quaid.
Yeah, and Mark Joseph might be there sometime soon too.
Okay, good, great.
So
I
the
love it.
guys-
What a weird, perfect circle little world
It
this
is, isn't it? Well,
I didn't even know that connection.
yeah. That's the connection. Anyway, we're working on the script now.
Wow. Yeah. So what's the reception been like? I hear this thing's winning awards here and there, and
We've
it's-
been very lucky. We have 15 awards now. We screened it last year in the Midwest in various towns, and the reaction in colleges, engineering schools, the response has been great.
You actually did.
Well, with the help of the distributor, I had to get a distributor.
And
I'm very
modesty
fortunate.
aside, and a hell of a
It's-
narrator.
We're a hell of a narrator is
Amazing
right.
narrator, really.
So yeah, we're gonna get out there now, and it's very exciting because I didn't know if we were gonna ever get it distributed. You never know. You make a film, you hope that people will like it when you screen it. You hope that maybe it's going to be good enough that a distributor will want it, but you just don't know.
You don't know.
You just don't know. And
But Jack, if your great uncle could run a company like Perfect Circle and could figure out how to keep a submarine from falling apart in the First World War and suggest that an automatic transmission might actually stick, and then to further suggest that controlling the speed of a vehicle might be something the average driver would appreciate, since the world's filled with so many poor drivers, to hear no at every turn and to overcome all of that. The movie that you're talking about, this documentary is terrific, but the movie you're talking about needs to be made, because that is an inspirational. Everybody listening to this thing has felt sorry for themselves at some point in the last week, and they've looked at themselves in the mirror and they say, "How am I going to deal with this? My frickin' boss is up my butt over here, and this and this and this and that and that." And there's your great uncle staring down the unions, staring down the bosses, staring down the military brass, staring down the dean of. And
Staring them down without any eyes.
staring him down without even seeing him.
oh, that's the funny part. Yeah.
Staring him down without even seeing them. Look, I want to just compliment you again. I wanted to be involved because I think your great uncle is a person the country needs to know. But on a personal level, I love the whole Sisyphean, quixotic venture of making a movie without a distributor and building an airplane while it's in the air and flying by the seat of your pants. My mom wrote her first book when she was 80.
Oh my gosh.
And she's written 3 more since, and they're New York Times bestsellers, right? Your uncle, it's a story of persistence and resiliency.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Plenty of talent there, but you don't get credit for talent. Those were the cards you're
Right.
dealt. The stuff you decide to do with the cards you have makes you either interesting or memorable or notable or something. And the fact that you picked it up after he was gone and did that for your family, I think that's as important to me as what your uncle did. I know a lot of people who have sat down to write a book about their family because they're so impressed with something somebody did, right, in their chain, and they want to be remembered, and they want their ancestors to be remembered. And there's something so poetic and beautiful about that. And it's hard to write a book without a publisher. And it's double hard to make a movie without a distributor, simply because you're afflicted with the knowledge that you come from pretty good stock.
I think a book may even be harder. I wouldn't even know how to start a book. But you, the one thing that you were saying about this being an inspiring story, everything that we got from the screenings, people walk out and say, I'm incredibly inspired. I have hope. I'm inspired to go out there and do something. And I think that's the takeaway that I would like people to have, is that you mentioned it before. I mean, we're all faced with things in life and challenges, but gee, look what Ralph did. And we have our eyesight. It is inspiring. I was inspired every day making the movie because of Ralph, knowing what he did. I'm not worried about if I can get a distributor. I want to make the best movie I can because Ralph is sitting there over my shoulder, giving me inspiration. And he inspires people. So yeah, that's the takeaway from all this.
Well, his work was a heck of a legacy, and your tribute, will live,
Well, thank you.
A lot longer than we will. I'm going to open up this banana bread, Rose, if you don't mind.
You open up the banana bread. And by the way,
Oh, yeah? Are there gifts?
I have Blind Logic hats
Nice.
and T-shirts for you,
Fantastic.
Chuck, and Mary.
Great. Hey, Rose, do me a favor. Walk next door and get a knife. Hey, or Taylor, can you do me a favor and grab a knife out of the utensil drawer? We're going to have some banana bread before we say goodbye. Yeah. I'm going to try this on camera so I can give it an honest assessment.
That's great.
Wow.
Yeah. No, look, I'm very
Now-
particular about my banana
Now be
bread.
careful what you do, because this could inspire Rose to open up a little business here. Banana
If I take a bite of this and,
Yeah.
and I drive down Santa Monica 6 months from now and Rose's Banana Emporium, the Banana Bread Emporium is open for business, we're going to need to talk about a percentage, I'm afraid, because
Oh yeah, she's very good with giving you a percentage.
I'll narrate your commercials, Rose.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just going to take a little piece from the end here. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's so moist. No, that's pretty good banana bread. That's a pretty good banana bread, Rose.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Glad you like it.
Hey, thanks for the swag, the carbohydrates, and your time.
Thank you, Mike. And Chuck, thank you very much.
I really admire what you've done, and I hope it inspires other people to tell the stories of their own families.
I was admired and inspired by your book, by the way. I love those stories.
Well,
Oh my gosh, the Jim Morrison one. I read through all these stories trying to pick who's he talking about,
Well,
and then
that's
and
why- look, dude,
sometimes I catch it, and sometimes where's he going with this?
well,
I love that book.
your great uncle would be a terrific subject for one of those stories. Even though most people don't know who he is, the fact, look at you plugging my own book on my own podcast.
That's
I love
because
it.
I love it so much. The stories in here are phenomenal.
Well, if I do
I-
another one, I'll see if I can't get Ralph in there because, look,
The Mel Brooks one.
that's a good one. That's a good one. Spoiler alert! Now people know it's Mel Brooks. You're killing me, Jack.
Yeah,
Kill
but they're going to read it and they won't know it's him.
That's right. They won't know. But I'll leave you with this, folks. The car you have today would not resemble the thing you're driving, but for the man we've been discussing, Ralph Teeter, and his grand nephew,
Right.
Jack.
Grand or great, yeah.
Whatever it is. Let's
A
start.
generation.
Let's start with what's better, grand or great? Like, would you rather be remembered as the great Jack Teeter, or that Jack Teeter, he was grand?
They don't call it the Great Old Opry.
No, that's true.
How about Ralph Teeter's great nephew?
That's not bad. But they also didn't call it the Grand Depression.
No, that's true too.